Today, I want to answer a super important question. Can I reach my GMAT goal score? A lot of people wonder whether success and how they define it is even possible in this situation. And I want to answer that question very definitively right at the top of this episode. And the answer is yes, you can. I have helped thousands of people do this. Many of them did not think that it could be done, and yet the results are unequivocally there. And the only consideration here is time frame. It is impossible to guarantee when you will hit any given score. There are way too many variables in that equation. There are variables like sleep, diet, exercise. There are unknown variables of human performance. If we knew how to control those variables, then every CEO would be at his or her best every single day. Every Olympic athlete would win the gold medal 100% of the time. Obviously, that's not happening. There are unknown variables in the situation that lead to peak performance. And while many of them can be controlled and optimized, as of today, we don't know how to do that perfectly. But I can, with 100% certainty, guarantee that you can reach your goal score. There are going to be things that are required that you do in order to make that happen, but it is 100% possible, even if it might take a little bit longer than you want it to. But in many situations, it can happen a lot faster than you want it to. And I want to talk through some of the keys that I have seen work the best in terms of building people's belief in themselves, but also at the same time driving the results. Because a lot of you are not going to believe it's possible for you until you see it. And we live in a world and a culture where seeing is believing. I don't know if that's good or bad, and we're not really here to comment on it. I'm just telling you, if you saw the goal score on a practice exam, you would have a lot more belief that you could hit that score on test day versus if you haven't seen it. So let's just jump right in. If you want the fastest results available, even though we can't guarantee the exact day that you would hit a score, there are ways to speed up the process. It's usually going to require a financial investment. If you want to hear a breakdown of what common investments are for different levels of service within the industry, then I go through a very detailed breakdown of that in an episode from earlier this year called How to Start Your GMAT Studies in 2024. But the short version of that, and I definitely recommend you check out that episode if you're curious about the details, because I break down a lot of the math. The short version is that a top instructor working with you one-on-one is going to be the best, but also the most expensive. That's going to get you the fastest results by and large. Right after that is going to be some course with some kind of live instruction or the ability to interact with the top expert. That's going to be less expensive, but a little bit slower. Then you'll have digital self-paced classes. That's going to be less expensive, but slower. And then you've got books and free resources, which are going to be less expensive or free, but generally slower. Now, I can't say that that's going to be the case for you personally because there is quite a bit of variance in this data. But if you look at a large enough data set, let's call it like 5,000 to 10,000 data points, then that is the pattern that emerges. So budget definitely matters. And the more you can invest, usually the better resources you'll have access to. Now, there's still things that you're going to have to do on your own. If people could just buy a result, then that would be for sure the most popular option. But some work it will likely be required of you. And having said all that, if you have the best resources available, that's how you'll achieve your personal best as fast as you can possibly achieve it. But there are still plenty of awesome free resources out there. There are plenty of things you can do that are within your control that are not budget related. And many of them are free or low cost. And if that's what you want to do, or that's the position you are in, then there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm going to break down all of those things right now so that you can, again, start to build this belief if you do not have it, and also reach your goal score faster, which is what we specialize in. So just to make this as clear as possible, if you do all the things I talk you through and you can afford to invest, you will almost certainly get faster results. If you cannot afford to invest and you do everything I'm talking about, then you will be on the fastest path that you can possibly be on. So there are three keys to this. They're going to be super obvious, but I am going to talk you through a lot of things that I think will help you understand all of these things on a much deeper level. That will definitely help. The first thing is you have to have the right plan. That sounds just painfully obvious, but we'll talk through the details of that. The second thing is you have to have the right execution. I think that that is intuitively understood by a lot of people, but maybe not discussed as much as it should be. It's just my personal opinion. And then you have to have the right optimization, which for most of you being business people will not be the problem. But there are probably ways you can improve your optimization system, and I'm going to do my best to help you with that. So let's start with number one, the right plan. If you have the wrong plan, that's going to make success really, really hard. And that might be the way for you to not reach your goal GMAT score, is just following the wrong plan. Now, I've talked about this a lot in the past. Sometimes you can't know what the right plan is for you personally until you try a plan, execute on it well, realize it's not working for you, and then shift gears. I'm going to do everything I can to keep that from happening for you and help you make good choices from the beginning. And again, highly recommend that How to Start Your GMAT Prep in 2024 episode. There's a new version of the exam this year. I will break down all the available plans for you. But for now, I just want to talk about how do we define the right plan and what are the basics of making sure that you're doing everything you can to select that right plan. And then if you want that more detailed information, that other episode is there for you. The right plan is just a realistic analysis of the current situation and a reasonable course of action to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be. That's it. It's a realistic analysis of the current situation and a reasonable course of action to close the gap. Let's start with number one. How do we make a realistic analysis of the current situation? You should take a baseline practice exam. If you haven't taken a practice exam yet, then it will be totally impossible to optimize your studies. And that might be part of the reason you're doubting whether you can do this. You're not even sure where you're beginning. For example, if I ask you what is the fastest route to Paris from an unknown starting destination, could you answer that question? I can't either. It is an unanswerable question because we need to know what the starting destination is in order to optimize the route to where we want to be. Most people understand that taking a baseline test is a good idea, but there's a lot of conflicting information out there. There's people who have kind of their own interests that they're trying to push in telling you to delay that baseline test. I don't recommend that. I recommend taking a baseline test. Now, if you've already taken a baseline test and you've been grinding for a long time and you're not sure where your current skill set is, that also might be a reason that you're doubting whether you can achieve the goal. So having some kind of relevant data about where your skill set and where your score is now, or at least recently, is really, really important if you're starting to doubt whether this can happen for you. Now, some of you might have just taken a test and seen a bad result or see your score go down. It does happen. And that's also a valuable data point. It's a painful data point, but it's a valuable data point because it is a realistic analysis of the current situation. Obviously, you're not doing something right if your score is going down. Okay. And I'm going to talk you through what you can do if you need to change things up today. But I would also recommend an episode we did earlier this year called How to Score High Consistently. And also last week's episode will help you out a lot as well if you have seen a score drop recently. Now, once you've got your baseline and you've got your analysis of the current situation, then the most basic plan is you focus on one section at first. And once you've built up your skill set in that one section, you can add instruction on a second and a third section. So let's say you take a baseline test and your quant is the lowest score and is therefore furthest away from your goal quant score. And your verbal score is a little closer to your goal verbal score, and your DI score is a little closer to your goal DI score. Then you're probably going to want to begin with quant. Now, even just knowing that is super valuable data because now you have a little bit more information around what kind of plan or what kind of program, if you're going to invest, is going to be a good fit for you. Maybe you want a program with a really good reputation for being strong with quant. Or maybe you're in the opposite situation where you need a lot of work on verbal. Maybe you want a program that's a lot stronger with verbal. So just taking that test and seeing where the current lay of the land is could save you months of grinding on a program that's a bad fit for you. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Every program has its strengths and every program has its weaknesses. If you're not sure what your strengths and weaknesses are, it's going to be hard to find a good fit in terms of a plan and a provider. Okay, so focus on one section at a time. Now, if you've been studying for a while, you'll be able to just re-optimize your studies and you might have like an 80-20 focus. So like 80% of your time might go into the thing that needs the most work while you do your other 20% time maintaining. That probably will be clear to you based on your assessment, but if you're not sure what to do, just reach out to us anytime. You can click the link in the description of this content and you can contact us there, or you can just reach out to us via DM on current social channels. We're just at the GMAT strategy. We'll be happy to help. Now, what does good mean? Good means 80% or better accuracy within the test time constraints. Just to make it super, super, super simple, I recommend focusing on accuracy first and then compete with the most recent set that you did to build up your speed. So let's say you're working on quant first, and let's say you can do a set of official quant questions on any given day of the week and get around 80% accuracy. But it takes you 3 minutes a question and you have regulation time, which would be about 2 minutes a question. Great, great. You're probably good on accuracy in that situation. If you're getting 60% every time and you're aiming for a top score, then you're going to want to work on your accuracy until you can hit 80. Now, if you're hitting 80 and your time is long, then you just start competing with your most recent set and you just try to be a little bit faster than your most recent set. So that's what we'll define good as. Now, as soon as you're hitting 80% or better accuracy within any given question type at your target score range within the time constraint, then you can move on to the next section. So if you're hitting 80% in quant in around 2 minutes, that's a good time to add in your verbal or your DI, whatever the next biggest priority is, okay? So that's how you make sure you have the right plan. First, you take a baseline test, and then you focus on one section at a time. And once you're good on one section, you can add another section on top of that while you maintain how good you are with the first section. Once you're good on two sections, you can add in the third section. That's the most basic way of assessing whether you're good in any given section. Now, if you end up picking a paid provider, they will probably go into way more detail about how to make that assessment. And that's cool if you can afford it. But if you can't, then this will absolutely work. The last point on having a good plan is having some kind of way of learning strategies for individual question types. So this is actually remarkably easy to figure out what's going to be best for you. Just ask yourself, are you more likely to learn well from books, a self-paced digital provider, live instruction, or just doing a lot of problems on your own? Just think about what have you had the most success with academically in the past, and trust that. Trust that you'll pick the right learning style for you. And then if that learning style is out of your budget, ask what's the next best thing? What's the thing you've had the second most success with academically, and then see if you can find a provider within your budget there. Definitely don't be afraid to invest if you do have the capital. Think about it this way. Do you want to go to the cheapest business school or do you want to go to the best business school? I mean, some of you do want the cheapest. You just need a scholarship and that's the situation you're in. That's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. But for many of you, you're like, honestly, I'm going to finance this thing anyway. The ROI is there. I really just want the best school. Then just ask yourselves, how is GMAT prep any different from that? Like, do you want the cheapest GMAT prep or do you want the best GMAT prep you can get for you personally? I don't know that there's a universal best, but I think it's kind of like a damaging concept to think about it that way. But there is a best fit for you. And it is really simple to figure out what that best fit is. Again, figure out what your goal score, timeline, and budget is. Go back to that how to start your GMAT studies in 2024 episode if you want more detail. Otherwise, just think about how you're going to learn best and how you've learned best in the past. Books, self-paced, live, or doing a lot of questions on your own. And then pick the option that fits with your budget there. Now, of course, don't be financially irresponsible. Just invest the maximum you can according to your budget and live with that. Everyone has constraints. I had financial constraints when I was studying back in the day, and that was really hard. It took me a lot longer than I wanted it to, but I got there. And I learned a lot in that process, and that was quite valuable. but it was 100% worth it. And if I had had more financial means, I would have invested a lot more, knowing what life is like on the other side of the process. So again, investing always involves risk. None of this is financial advice. This is just my opinion, and hopefully it's like common sense advice enough that it makes just total sense to you. But never invest more than you can afford to lose. Um, Maybe that goes without saying, but it's always good to be reminded. So, right plan. That's a super simple way to assess whether you have the right plan. If you were listening to any of that and you're like, crap, I'm not doing that, then that is a good sign that it's time to get a better plan. If you're like, okay, cool, I did this right, then you should have even more belief than when we started the episode that you're at least on the right path. Once you have the confidence that you're on the right path or you've made the best bet that you possibly can, now now the second thing that you need is right execution. So let's define what that is. Right execution is simply taking care of your body and staying consistent with your study time. It's just those two things. And if you don't do one of those two things, your execution is really going to suffer. And if you're not executing well, then having the perfect plan is not going to help you. Maybe that goes without saying, but hopefully just helping you think through this live in real time, especially if you're having trouble believing if this is possible for you. So let's go a little bit further with what does it mean to take care of your body and what does it mean to stay consistent with your study time? Taking care of your body is just reasonable sleep, reasonable diet, and reasonable exercise. I've talked about this a lot in the past. Does not need to be perfect. You don't need to be a professional athlete. If you're into that stuff and you like to obsess over it, awesome. If you hate thinking about that stuff, just make sure that it's not bad. Okay. As long as your sleep, diet, and exercise is not bad, it's not limiting your growth. Could you get a great result without good sleep, diet, and exercise? Yes, that's definitely possible. I'm sure people have done it, but I would estimate it's less than a 10% chance that you would hit a peak score, quote unquote peak score. I think most of us would agree that a peak performance is probably going to require at least a good physical situation. Now, there's also a 90% chance that improving your sleep, diet, and exercise will help literally everything in your life, including your GMAT score. So none of this is medical advice, but I've gone so deep with this stuff in the past that I really just want to keep it super, super simple and high level for you today. So the real key with improving your sleep, diet, and exercise, like the number one big domino that knocks all the other dominoes over, is just track your sleep, diet, and exercise. There is an incredibly brilliant person named Peter Drucker. He's written a ton about management science and business in general. I highly recommend that you read his books, all of them if you can. But managing oneself is a good place to start. And then the Daily Drucker is kind of like a greatest hits if you want a high level overview. But one of the big concepts that I learned from him is simply by tracking things, they tend to improve. I don't know if we know the way systems work well enough to understand why that works. Maybe some of you are deep on systems theory, much more knowledgeable than I am. Maybe you can explain this to me, but I do know that it does work. I've seen it work enough times to believe in it. And if you're not tracking, then that might be a little bit irresponsible. So there are people relying on you to be at your best with almost 100% certainty. You probably work in an organization with other people who rely on you. You probably have relationships where your performance affects their performance, at least to a little bit of a degree. And just ask yourself, like, would you openly admit to these people who rely on you that you don't care about them enough to track your sleep, diet, and exercise? If that would be embarrassing, which it would for me, just saying, then it's definitely time to have a better tracking system. And all I'm recommending is that you track it. I'm not even recommending that you do anything about it. I'm not even recommending that you change your sleep, diet, and exercise. I'm just recommending that you start tracking all of them. And I can virtually guarantee, I'm not going to say I can guarantee it because I don't know you personally, but I can virtually guarantee that if you stay consistent with tracking your sleep, tracking your diet, and tracking your exercise in a way that works, then all three will improve over time. And even a 1% compounding improvement on a weekly basis, let's say, in all three of those things can lead to a massively, massively more high performing human being over time. Now, if you don't want to track data, I would just ask you to consider whether an MBA is for you. Something to consider, okay? Now, Quick recommendations here. I'm not going to go too deep on it. Tracking sleep, I would just get like a free app for your phone, try out a couple and find one that you like. Many of you are into the like smart tech, smart wearables kind of thing. That works too. Just it could be manual, just like how many hours did I sleep each night if you're more into the analog thing, trying to do less screen time or whatever your situation is. It doesn't really matter what the tracking system is, as long as you can look back 30 days from now and be like, how did I sleep on November 12th, 2024? Same thing with your diet. There's great free apps. There are great other ways to do it now with AI tech. You can just take pictures of your food and it can log it for you. It's super cool. Again, could be manual, just a notebook where you write down calories or just literally what you ate. And then same thing with exercise. Could be rep sets or just classes you took. It could just be a record of the classes you took in any given month and how often you went and how often you did it. It could be that basic and it will help. It will help. Um, I use a sleep tracker called Rise Sleep and Energy. It is paid, but I like it because I actually don't like wearable tech. Well, I'm super into the tech part of it, but wearing things actually hurts my sleep, which is kind of weird. So I tried. I tried really hard. I tried them all. So non-wearable is good for me. For diet, I use an app called Fat Secret. It's terribly named. There's a study in branding for us all right there, but it works great and it's totally free. And then for exercise, I just have a note on my phone where I just track like time and reps and sets on specific exercises. But yeah, so again, like it's literally just a note and just a list of what I did on any particular date, but I could go back 90 days and I could tell you exactly what my reps and sets were for those days. So that's it. That's that's sleep, diet, exercise. Just start tracking and send me a note if you're like, wow, I honestly didn't think that was going to work, but thank you so much. That was awesome. Okay, so that's taking care of your body. The other half of right execution is staying consistent with your study time. You want to do your best with this, and this will change over time. So you want to consistently increase your study time until your other commitments suffer, and then you want to back it off. That's your quote unquote best. And the way to do this is I talked about this last week, but always do 10% more than you think you can. And then when your other commitment starts to suffer, like your performance at work suffers, your personal relationships start to suffer, your mood and energy and health start to suffer, that's when you know, okay, I'm doing too much and I can back it off a little bit. And that's where you know where the limit is. Now, none of this is medical advice. If you have specific conditions emotionally, psychologically, or physically, then don't do this. Just do the best that you possibly can with your limitations. But this is what I recommend if you're healthy and capable of pushing yourself to that extent. So that's step number one. That's how you know you're putting in enough time and you're putting in that time as consistently as possible. If you haven't hit the limit, then you're not doing enough yet. The other part is just sticking to the plan. So we talked about how you know you have the right plan, but you cannot evaluate the results of the plan unless you have actually executed on what you said you would do. This is one of the biggest problems in the industry is people ask for a plan and then they just do what they feel like doing instead of sticking to the plan. That's definitely not everybody, but it could be a lot of you. And that is totally understandable. I'll talk about that in a second, but what you're doing in that situation is you're being that sort of like insubordinate teammate in the business. Except the team is you as an individual. Like you're the whole team and then you're like not executing on the strategy that the whole team and the whole business agreed on. So the question to ask yourself is if you become a great leader, which all of you, my greatest hope is that you will all become that, world needs it, is to ask yourself, is that the kind of person that I want to manage when I become a leader? Do I want to manage the person who I cook up the perfect plan, give it to them, and then they don't do it? Is that who you want to manage? And if that's not who you want to manage, then ask yourself, why are you doing that to yourself? Is that who you want to be? Probably not. So let's talk about why this happens. Resistance is what I like to call the force that keeps us from fulfilling on our commitments, even when we have the best intentions. Uh, it's a fundamental part of the human experience. Almost everybody can relate to setting a proper intention and then not following through on it. Not necessarily even because of willpower, although sometimes it is. Sometimes you just forget. There's all forms of resistance, but let's just talk about resistance a little bit. Resistance is completely natural. M Most of us would agree that the function of our body is to survive. And when you start to go against some of those survival instincts by pushing your limits a little bit, sometimes the body rebels. It gets tired. It sends negative thoughts to the brain. It might result in some negative emotions, or it might result in procrastination. Procrastination happens because when you think about doing a task that's difficult, it lights up the pain centers in your brain, like same thing as if you touched a hot stove, physical pain receptors. And then what you want to do is you want to recoil from that. That's the natural survival instinct. And so what the brain does emotionally when it thinks of that difficult task is it just refocuses its attention on something else, and you start to crave these other distractions like being on the internet or like quick dopamine hits. It's totally natural, completely natural thing. And the thing that you want to do and the way to get better at handling resistance is to realize that that's a good thing when that happens. Think about it this way. When the weight starts to feel heavier in your workout, do you think you're doing the workout wrong, or do you think you're doing the workout right? When you're like on rep number 10 and you're like, wow, this is starting to get a little tough right here. Is that where you're like, oh, I'm not doing something right? Or is that where you're like, oh, okay, it's working. Like I'm getting tired. This is hard to do. Most of us have a good relationship to that physical form of resistance, but we don't always have a good relationship to the mental and psychological form of resistance. So just ask yourself, how is this different? Like if you're thinking about studying hard and it feels like, I don't really feel like going to the gym or lifting that heavy weight right now, is that a bad thing? Obviously, it would be better if you had no resistance, but I just don't know if that's realistic. So if you feel like it's a good thing, that's good. If you don't yet feel like it's a good thing, you want to reframe it because again, your instincts are wired to keep you safe and you just want to rewire them to focus on greatness rather than just safety. The safest thing is probably not to stretch any of your capabilities and just hedge all of your bets and never take any risks to the maximum extent that you can. But if you look at the opportunity cost of that, you'll often see that's often actually riskier if you look at it intellectually because you're not getting all the upside. Like a lot of people think their biggest expense is taxes, but for most of us, our biggest expense is not knowing how to make more money. Like for example, what did not knowing how to make $1 billion a year cost you last year? Probably a lot more than you paid in taxes. Now, I'm not saying money is everything. None of this is financial advice, but you get the idea. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking the risk just because it feels scary. So if you're feeling that resistance, if you're feeling scared, that's your opportunity to treat it like a difficult set in the gym. Like when the weight starts getting heavy and you feel like giving up, is that a bad thing when you're working out, or is that how you know it's working? Consider that the same thing might be true of your study process. If you're like, man, I really don't feel like studying right now, think like, great, great, I'm pushing my limit. I'm growing. If I don't push through right now, then I'm not going to get stronger. The fact that I'm feeling this resistance means I'm leaning on my comfort zone, and that's the surest sign that I'm improving. So a very simple tactic to operationalize this is just to track how much you're sticking to the plan versus deviating from your plan. Again, it just goes back to Peter Drucker. If you track it, it'll automatically improve. Just have a simple spreadsheet. What did I plan to do today in terms of study? And what did I actually do today in terms of study? And just give yourself a percentage score every single day. Super, super simple. It'll take you 5 seconds. And just look at it based on the checklist of what I committed to. Did I do everything 100%? Did I do 70%? Did I do 60%? Am I cutting corners? And am I doing my best? It's going to be really difficult to get other people to execute the way that you want them to as a leader unless you can demonstrate what it looks like. So you might as well start improving that now. And the best way to improve it is just to track it. Okay. So execution, right execution is all about just tracking. Track your sleep, diet, and exercise, and track how well you're sticking to the plan. Don't worry if you feel resistance to it. Resistance is great. Resistance is how we get stronger. Think about it this way. The way a mentor said it to me one time that really clicked for me is, Isaac, do you feel your best after doing something easy or after accomplishing something hard? It was a deep question. Changed my life. Okay, number 3 is optimization. Talked about this before. Optimization, let's define it. It's just a data feedback loop. And we kind of were just touching on that when when we were talking about execution with the tracking thing, keeping it simple. Optimization is hugely connected to that, but let's talk about some of the things that go beyond just tracking. So what you're doing when you're optimizing is you're running experiments. It's like being a scientist. So the most important thing that you need is a tracking system because you can't really do scientific experiments unless you can track results. Or I mean, I guess you could do the experiments, but like you probably wouldn't learn anything from them. Sorry. Accuracy of language is very important to me. If you hadn't picked up on that already from listening to this, if you are a regular listener, so I will make those caveats from time to time, and I hope it's okay. Hope it lands well. Um, so basically, I already just went off on tracking, but just to drive the point home, if you're tracking, you're definitely improving. And if you're not tracking, you are almost certainly by default getting worse. It's a very simple, very powerful thing. Okay. So that's why I was leaning into the tracking piece. But the whole optimization thing is going to be super familiar for most of you just because of your day-to-day role in your job and in society. And the key with optimization is just look at what the data is telling you. And let's keep it super simple and focused on GMAT for now. Is your accuracy going up? Can you look at the past 30 days and say, I am getting rates and work questions right at a higher accuracy rate than I was 30 days ago, all else being equal? Okay. If that's going up, you're doing the right things. Are your times going down? If your accuracy is already good, like we said, 80%, are you able to compete with yourself? Let's say 8 times out of 10, are you able to win against your previous set time? And if you look back 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, are you seeing a positive trend in the right direction? All of you will likely be super familiar with this. Like you track, like for a lot of you, your whole job is tracking data. Okay. Next thing, are you missing fewer questions you know how to do? That's obviously related to accuracy, but this is just another metric that I think personally is worth tracking. Missing questions you know how to do is a huge score killer. Finally, maybe obviously, is your score going up? If the score is not going up, something's not right. If you're working, the score should be going up. Okay. I talked a lot last week about how to know when you should change up your study plan. I talked a little bit ago about how to assess your plan. Basically, if you're executing super well on your plan and your score's not going up, you definitely have the wrong plan. But if you're not executing well enough, you got to fix that first. Okay. So if your score's not going up or your accuracy is not going up or your time's not going down, etc., figure out why. Figure out why. And sometimes, like for example, if you can't afford to invest at all, you just need to make a guess if you're not sure and then run an experiment to test your hypothesis. For example, let's say that you're missing a lot of questions you know how to do, and you look back 30 days and you're like, I'm missing questions I know how to do at the same rate that I was 30 days ago. Obviously, something's not working here. So, so let's just choose a simple fix for that. Let's say you're going to write more down, and you hypothesize that like writing what the question's asking every time, writing out all your algebra steps, writing out your computation steps, etc., will help you miss fewer questions. Let's say that's the experiment you're going to do. Well, if you do 10 sets of 10 problems each, so 100 problems, and you write more down on every single question within those sets, and you're still missing just as many questions as before, then writing more down didn't help. That's not the answer. Okay, that's still valuable data. Now you can run a new experiment. Now, in my experience, writing more down will almost always help you miss fewer questions you know how to do, but I'm just using this as a like comically simple example. But sometimes it's just good to be reminded of the basics because I've noticed, especially recently, there's a lot of people in the space talking about these like really complex and advanced nuance like approaches and strategies based on like I'm not going to name any names or call anybody out because maybe those strategies are working for you, but I've just noticed that people are pushing these like really complex approaches, and there is a time and a place for that. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm going to judge a strategy based on how it works, not whether it's complex or not. Like, if it gets the job done, great, we're doing it. But I just want to give you something to compare against those things. Like, you might not need a 65-step study plan, everybody. You might need like a 10-step study plan. Now, maybe you do need 65, and that's where having a professional help you could be helpful to know that. But if you're seeing good results and your numbers are improving, maybe it's just going back to basics. So just something to consider. And um, I would say my clients run the gamut, if I'm honest. Like some people just need to do the basics better, and other people have been doing the basics better and need something more advanced. And then there's everybody in between. So I guess I can't say with any like predictive accuracy which situation you're likely in. I'm just inviting you to look at it. Okay. But back to running experiments. Hopefully I've made this like really, really simple. Like pick the thing, the new behavior that you think is going to help you, run it on 100 problems, and then look at the data. Is it helping or not? Okay. It's that simple. That's optimization. Side note, this is probably how you'll end up scaling companies and processes and teams. So you might as well fall in love with that hypothesis, data tracking, re-optimize process if you're not already. It's pretty fun when you get into it. That's it, everybody. It's the right plan, paid or free. Just make a plan, execute well on it, and then you can evaluate whether that was the right decision or not. If you need to change plans, that's super common. I would say most people in the space end up working with 2 or 3 providers or 2 or 3 plans to get the right one. Happens all the time. Don't worry if that's you. It's very difficult to make a perfect decision at the beginning, but if you want to make the best decision you can, just check out that episode, How to Start Your GMAT Studies in 2024. Then you need right execution, which is just tracking your sleep, diet, exercise, and how well you're sticking to your plan. That's it. And then you optimize. Just check the data at least once a week and run a new experiment based on what you see. That is how it's done. If you do those things and you do them consistently and you do them for long enough, you will hit your goal GMAT score. It is a mathematical certainty. But if you are running the wrong plan, or you're not executing well, or you're not optimizing based on data feedback, then it's not going to happen. Okay? It's that simple. As always, if you have questions about any of this stuff, reach out to us anytime. We love hearing from all of you. And after all these years, we're still keeping up with DMs. It's a fun little challenge on our side. So reach out if you have questions. We never pitch in DMs or anything like that. We do have paid products. If you're interested in working with us, just head to the website, register for the webinar, and then you can book a call to learn more. If you like our style, if you don't, it's totally cool. No stress. In the meantime, my greatest hope is that this material will make your studies as easy and as painless as they can possibly be. If you want more tips and strategies for optimizing your performance on the GMAT, please head to our website, thegmatstrategy.com, which is linked in the description of this content, and check out our free video on how you can reach your dream GMAT score in half the normal time. Regularly, I hear from people who are like, hey, this was really helpful. Thank you so much. Some of them work with us, some of them don't. It's all good. We're here to help. And if you want more support, that's cool too. In the meantime, this is a weekly show, so please subscribe and please stay positive and stay consistent with your studies. Talk to you all soon.